I never imagined that a simple DNA test could turn our entire world upside down. My husband and I had been together since college, deeply in love, happily married, and raising the sweetest 5-year-old girl we both adored. We had been trying for a baby when she was born, and I never once strayed from our vows. So when my husband suddenly accused me of infidelity after getting a paternity test, I was blindsided. The results said he wasn't her biological father, but that made no sense because I knew I had never cheated. I was devastated, confused, and desperate to prove my innocence and keep our family together. What came next was even more shocking. Further testing revealed that I wasn't her biological mother either. Somewhere, somehow, our daughter had been switched at birth, and now everything we thought we knew about our family, our past, and our future was called into question. We were both reeling. My husband didn't want to believe it either. He told me later that he only did the test because of something someone said online. A comment about how two blue-eyed parents can't have a brown-eyed child. At first, he brushed it off, but over time, he said he couldn't get the thought out of his head. He started looking at our daughter differently, not with less love, just with quiet confusion. I didn't know he was feeling that way. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask questions. He didn't tell me what was bothering him. He just took a paternity test behind my back. When it came back saying he wasn't the biological father, something inside him broke. He didn't yell or scream. He just shut down. He looked at me with suspicion I'd never seen before. Suddenly, the man who'd once trusted me with everything, the one who used to hold my hand in the middle of the night just because, started locking himself in his office, pulling away from both me and our daughter. I was completely blindsided. I remember the exact moment he confronted me. It was early morning. I was still in pajamas, getting breakfast ready for our little girl, when he walked into the kitchen with this cold, flat look on his face. He didn't say good morning. He just asked, "Is there something you need to tell me?" I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but then he laid the paper on the table, the DNA result, and said, "She's not mine." My heart dropped. I couldn't breathe. I remember my voice shaking as I told him, over and over, "That's not possible. I never cheated on you." But he didn't believe me. He said I was lying, that the science didn't lie. He even told me to get out of the house. I couldn't go. I wouldn't. That was my home. That was our daughter. I refused to leave, so he locked me out of the bedroom and slept alone. I ended up crashing in our daughter's room that night, holding back tears while she slept beside me, clueless to the chaos unraveling around her. The worst part wasn't even the test. It was knowing he didn't trust me, that he didn't come to me first, that he believed some printout over the person he married, the person he built a life with. It felt like our entire relationship was being rewritten by a lab report. Suddenly, everything we had, the memories, the plans, the promises, felt fragile, conditional, like he would throw it all away based on a result I couldn't even understand. I tried to talk to him, to beg him to take another test, to see a doctor, anything. I knew in my bones I hadn't cheated, and I loved this man so deeply that I was willing to fight for our marriage, even while being accused of the worst betrayal. I didn't know it then, but the truth was far more complicated than either of us had ever imagined. After that first confrontation, everything changed. The man I had known and loved since college was still there physically, but emotionally, he was gone. It was like he'd built a wall between us overnight. He barely spoke to me unless it was necessary, and when he did, his tone was clipped-guarded, like I was a stranger who couldn't be trusted. He wouldn't eat meals with us anymore. He started keeping the bedroom door locked, and even when we were in the same room, it felt like we were miles apart. But what hurt even more than his coldness toward me was how distant he became with our daughter. He didn't play with her like he used to. He stopped reading bedtime stories, stopped making her pancakes on Sundays. He told me he needed time, that he didn't know how to act around someone else's kid. Hearing him say that shattered me, because she wasn't someone else's. She was ours. I had carried her, nursed her, rocked her to sleep 1,000 nights. I knew her laugh, her moods, her favorite songs. She was our daughter in every way that mattered. I kept trying to reach him. At first, I handed him my phone without question when he asked to see it, hoping it would reassure him that I had nothing to hide. I offered to let him check anything he needed: texts, emails, social media. I wanted him to see how impossible this accusation was. But he never really explained what he was looking for. He would scroll through my apps in silence, like he was trying to catch me in something. Eventually, I told him that if he wanted to go through my phone, he needed to be honest with me about why. That didn't go over well. He said I was trying to control the narrative, trying to manipulate him. I wasn't. I was just exhausted. From the fear, the confusion, the silence. It felt like I was screaming into a void, and no matter how loud I shouted, nothing got through. The man who used to hold me, when I cried now, barely looked me in the eye. I missed him so badly it felt like grief. Still, I refused to give up. I stayed, even when it hurt. I started doing research and writing down the names of labs and specialists who could retest the samples. I even looked into rare genetic phenomena, anything that might explain what had gone wrong. I believed there had to be an explanation, and I was determined to find it. If I could just prove the test was wrong, we could fix this. Eventually, he softened just enough to have a real conversation with me. He said he still loved our daughter, that he wasn't going to kick me out of the house, and that he was willing to hear me out, just not right away. We hugged. It was brief, but it gave me hope. I thought the worst was behind us, that maybe we were on the road to healing. But nothing could prepare me for what we'd discover next, that neither of us was biologically related to the child we had raised for 5 years. I felt like I was floating above my own body. My first instinct was denial. This had to be a mistake. Maybe the samples were contaminated. Maybe they mislabeled something. But the results were clear. Neither of us was biologically related to the daughter we had raised since birth. That's when the fear really set in. Everything I thought I knew, everything I trusted, fell apart in that moment. I remembered the delivery room, the hospital, the nurse who had taken her for her first checkup. All of it replayed in my mind, but now it felt hazy, suspicious. I started panicking. If our daughter wasn't biologically ours, then whose child was she? And where was our baby? We contacted the police. There wasn't any shouting or dramatics, just stunned silence as we explained what had happened. They took our statements and opened a case. We were told that this wasn't common, but it had happened before. Rarely, yes, but it was possible for babies to be switched at birth due to human error. I couldn't believe it. We were those people, the ones you read about in heartbreaking news stories. I just never imagined we'd be living it. As we waited for updates, I could barely function. I kept hugging our daughter tighter, staring at her little face, terrified of the day someone might come and try to take her away. Because even though we didn't share DNA, she was still mine. I raised her. I kissed every scraped knee. I stayed up through fevers and nightmares. She's my daughter in every way that matters. Oddly, it was in that moment, when our world was at its most uncertain, that I started getting my husband back. The weight of the accusation lifted, and he began to realize I had never betrayed him. The betrayal hadn't come from inside our home. It had come from a hospital, from a system that had failed us in a way we couldn't yet fully understand. But one thing was suddenly, heartbreakingly clear. This wasn't a story about infidelity. It was a story about lost identity and the terrifying unknowns we now had to face together. After the test results and the police reports, life didn't return to normal. It couldn't. But something shifted between my husband and me. The tension that had been tearing us apart for months finally gave way to a quiet, shared grief. We were no longer battling each other. Now we were both fighting the same enemy, the unknown. The lawsuit against the hospital was moving slowly, like everything involving legal systems tends to. In the meantime, we were working with law enforcement and a private investigator to try and find our biological child. It felt surreal, like we were on the outside looking in, watching someone else's life fall apart. Every time the phone rang, my stomach dropped. I wanted answers so badly, but I was terrified of what those answers might bring. In the midst of all this chaos, we decided to keep things as stable as possible for our daughter. We didn't tell her the truth, not yet. She's still too young to understand concepts like genetics or what it would mean if we told her we weren't her biological parents. To her, we are mom and dad, And that hasn't changed. We made a quiet, mutual promise. No matter what we learned, no matter who her biological parents turned out to be, we would protect her. Always. But protecting her meant carrying the weight ourselves. I cried more than I ever have in my life. Not just for the child I might never meet, but for the one sleeping in the next room. The little girl who might one day learn that her whole identity was built on a mistake she didn't ask for. I fear how it might change her, or how it might affect her sense of belonging. I feared losing her, not to the courts, but emotionally, to confusion, to doubt, to questions I wouldn't know how to answer. I started journaling. Writing helped me process the chaos swirling around us. I even began drafting out what we might say to her when the time was right, when she was old enough to understand without being hurt by it. My husband, too, became more emotionally present. He started tucking her in again, brushing her hair in the mornings, sitting beside her while she colored. Watching them together reminded me why I fell in love with him in the first place. We also talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. He opened up about his guilt, how ashamed he was forever believing I had betrayed him. He told me how those online communities he leaned on had fed his fears, not calmed them. I told him I understood, that I didn't hate him for doubting, because we had all been operating in the dark. We cried together for the baby we didn't know, for the trauma we had endured, and for the family we still had, no matter how complicated it had become. Through it all, one thing became crystal clear. Biology didn't define our love. The little girl we had raised was ours in every way that mattered, and we were going to keep fighting for her, for the truth, and for the life we were determined not to lose. The days since learning the truth have blurred into a strange rhythm, one part legal chaos, one part fragile family life, and one part quiet waiting. Every moment has been heavy with uncertainty. But if there's one thing we've learned through this nightmare, is that family isn't built solely on blood. It's built on presence, on effort, and on love. Even as we wait for updates from the police and our legal team, we've tried to create a sense of normalcy for our daughter. We kept up with bedtime stories, school projects, Saturday pancakes, anything to preserve the rhythm of the life she knows. She still laughs the same, still runs into our room in the morning, still curls up beside me when she's sleepy. She's our little girl, and no DNA test can erase the 5 years we spent raising her. But behind the scenes, we're making difficult plans. We've spoken with a child psychologist to prepare ourselves for the conversation we know is coming. There will be a day, maybe not soon, but inevitably, when our daughter will learn the truth about how she came into our lives. It won't be fair to hide it forever. Children deserve honesty, even when it's painful. But they also deserve timing and context that protect them emotionally. We're not there yet. Not while she's this young, this vulnerable. We've talked about possible outcomes if the biological family of our daughter is found. Would they want contact? Would they want custody? Would they hate us? Or feel grateful that we raised her with love? And what about our own biological child? Where is she? Is she safe? Loved? Does she look like us? The not knowing is the hardest part. I've imagined meeting her 1,000 times. I wonder if she'd recognize something in me. My laugh, my hands, the way I smile when I'm trying not to cry. Would I feel a spark of recognition? Or would it feel like meeting a stranger I should have known all along? My husband and I have talked about it endlessly. We both agreed that if our biological daughter is found, we want to be a part of her life, but not at the cost of anyone's happiness or stability. The only way forward, if it ever comes to that, is through compassion. Maybe, if the other family is open to it, we could build a bridge. Maybe we could co-parent in some way. Maybe we could be two families connected by the most unimaginable twist of fate. I don't know if that's realistic. I don't even know if it's healthy. But I do know that I want all of these children, both of them, to grow up surrounded by love and not confusion or resentment. Until then, all we can do is wait and hope. For now, we hold tight to the family we've built. We keep showing up. We keep loving fiercely, even through heartbreak and uncertainty. Our story isn't one of betrayal. It's one of endurance, of choosing each other again and again, even when everything else falls apart. And if there's one thing this experience has taught us, it's that love, the real, steady, unconditional kind, is more than enough to begin again.